because I went to Vietnam last year, and Vietnam, you think it's a third world country and all this type of stuff, which it could be. Like there's certain pockets that definitely is, but we went to this one city named Da Nang, and I kid you not, I thought I landed in Miami. Like it was just insane. Like the technology infrastructure they have there, the incubators they have there, like they have almost had one at like every other street corner. Right. And some of the companies that were coming out that you talked about, and I was on vacation, but I'm naturally curious enough to go visit. And I'm talking to these guys, I'm like, this doesn't, like everything they built in the city, that's literally the one place where I didn't even feel like I was in Vietnam.
This episode of the BloomX podcast is brought to you by MCRO, who enables businesses to grow through handcrafted digital solutions of the future. MCRO is a web and mobile app development studio with a competent, dedicated, and experienced team focused on solving business challenges through fast-to-market and high-performance digital products. If you're looking to turn your disruptive ideas into reality or have a reliable strategic tech partner, to explore options for your existing work, reach out to Henry Yu from MCRO for a chat over coffee or a Bone Shaker IPA, your choice.
Okay, so we're on. David from YSpace, thank you for joining us here today, man.
Thank you for having me, Ravi.
Yeah, so I mean, I just want to take some time today to go over with you like what YSpace is, what do you guys do, how you got involved, what kind of companies you guys work with. You're the Innovation Center for University of York?
Yep.
Right, York University, sorry. And you're located in Markham.
Yeah, so I think it's a funny story because it's kind of everyone's first thought is like, why are you in Markham? How did this even happen? Because where we are is essentially Keel and Steeles. Essentially, the whole thing really started because in 2015 we won an RFP to build a campus for Markham. So if you look at the entire York region, where there's 9 municipalities, it's probably the biggest region that doesn't have an institution in it. So we won the bid, and we were lucky enough to be able to go in and build something. But before we built that, the university kind of said, you know what, like we kind of know we want to go in and build this as a community. We want to build a university that's integrated with Markham. People can walk through, really has that downtown vibe, because that's where we're located. It's called Downtown Markham, so it's a revitalization to bring life into Markham. So we have a lot of corporates, a lot of like fun lifestyle type of restaurants as well for people. So we got in there about 2017, and we opened our doors in January. So it's roughly been about 2 years now, but the main thing that we were kind of focused on is creating this community hub where we can work with students, corporates, and startups to help them scale and grow and learn about entrepreneurship and what that looks like. So now what we essentially mainly do is help scale technology and food companies and help them scale up to the point where they're ready to move on and take on their own offices. Right now, we're at about 27 companies that we work with. So the wide variety kind of goes anywhere from technology in the med tech, property technologies, hardware, software, you name it, we have the whole gamut. The future is to scale down because it takes a lot of time to work with every single sector out there. But we're trying to feel out what's in the community and what the people are working on so we know where to tailor our resources. But the other side that we started focusing on that we're actually super excited for, and so is the community, is this food and beverage space in the consumer packaged goods. It's something that not a lot of people talk about. We all love food, we all eat food, it's a common thing, but no one thinks about how do we scale these food companies up, how do we work with them. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of support from a food starter standpoint that's in downtown Toronto. They recently closed in December, but when we saw how Arlene Dickinson came in, bought them out, rebranded them District Ventures Kitchen, we're like, we're doing something right. There's a lot of attention on it right now. Just this little scene that's starting to burst, and we can kind of tell. So we built this food accelerator where our purpose is to take companies that are in stores, has traction, but scale up 3 to 5 times over the next 5 months. And we're happy to say we've selected 6 companies that we're excited to work with, and we're launching in September, and we'll take us through to February. And some of the companies we're really happy with, and we think there's going to be some really good ones that's going to scale up really fast, and hopefully we'll be able to support them in that as well.
That's amazing, because exactly like what you said, like, I think servicing different markets is so important. We're seeing a lot of different incubators, accelerators to help the innovation economy grow and flourish in the region. And CPG brands, especially the new emerging ones, there is not a lot of support.
Yeah.
But let's delve into that a little bit. Like, so why is there a need for this? Like, why are there new emerging CPG brands? Like, what is the markets they're addressing, and what do they look like?
Yeah, I think I love what you said. Like, was there a need? Because honestly, we questioned it too when we started. So background is started at the DMZ, worked in that field. So all we did was service tech. So when I came to YSpace, it was like, this is easy. Like I know how to do the technology incubator. Let's just get it up, get it running, take the DMZ model, replicate it. But what we started finding really weird was, I think for the first 6 months, every week we got a call from a food company in the area being like, how can you help us? And we're like, we can't. And after 6 months of hearing the same thing over and over again, I think as an organization and as a team, we have to sit back and say, something's not right. Like if everyone keeps asking, something's not right in the ecosystem and someone needs to do something. So we kind of turned our heads and said, okay, do we want to be the ones? Do we want to say, you know what, let's test this, let's try it. So we did that. We took on 2 food companies and we tested the models that we had and the assumptions that we had. And we started working with some of them, and we were able to get one company to $260,000 last year, and this year on track for $1 million with the US. So we said, you know what, there's a model we're figuring out right now. We think we know what it's gonna look like. Let's test it more. So the more we're testing it and building these things out, we're like, we think we have something that a lot of these companies can use. And talking to the community, the other part of it is technology is an ecosystem. If you think about it, from Waterloo to Toronto to San Fran, like there's an entire ecosystem built around how to scale these companies up. In food, it doesn't exist. So you have your co-packers, you have your manufacturers, you have your suppliers, then you have, like, no one really talks. Your retailer, your broker, everyone's like, here's what I do really well, leave me alone. Here's what I do really well, leave me alone. But like, we're like, if you guys just talk and figure out how you can support the ecosystem, that'd be fantastic. Like, one of the biggest challenges we see for food companies when they're ramping up is that when they have these massive purchase orders and they want to take it on, they can't, because their co-packers or the manufacturers like, well, you have to give me this much minimum, so spend this much dollars. Like, I don't even have that. How do I have that without actually producing the equipment or producing the product and selling it and getting the cash flow? I can't. So that was the biggest thing that we started seeing. We're like, okay, can we build this network out and have these conversations of, hey, here's where the struggles of the companies are. Can we fix this as an ecosystem? Can we do this together rather than us being like, well, this is how I make my money, so leave me alone and do what I need? So that's where we kind of said, you know what, this is going to be a really big challenge, not only to support food companies, but to help educate the entire ecosystem and bring everyone together. So one of the things we're doing right now is, we know that it can't just be us. So we are working closely with the York Region government, and they have a food network kind of sector, and they have individuals who are very specific on agriculture and food. And we're working with them to have them help us identify all the manufacturers, co-packers, brokers, everyone in the community, and we say, okay, can you help us bring everyone together? And then can we start doing the conversation both ways? From a government organization, from an outside institution, can we tackle this both ways and say, how do we help these companies scale? Forget this, I need to make my money. Let's all grow together, because in the long run, if you say, I need to make my money, it's so short-sighted that if these companies scale up and they stay with you, you're gonna make so much more down the road. So that's our focus right now, is say, let's build this out together with the community. And we think we're going to be solving something that's going to be really interesting in the next couple of years. I think the food scene will probably really pop in the next 3 to 5 years. So we're just figuring that out right now, I think.
So why is that? Like, why is food or beverages going to pop? What's the demand there? I mean, you talked about how the industry doesn't really communicate to each other. Like, other than the process, like the disruption in the distribution channels, do you see that being the disrupting force, or do you see the actual products changing?
It's a bit of everything, I think. Product is definitely one of those things I think is going to change just because of trends that are happening, regulations that are coming out. Like, everyone is on, I swear everyone I know in my life has been on this keto diet at one point in their life. Yeah. This keto diet, this new craze, like, oh my goodness. And it's like, okay, well, how are food companies going to adapt? Because if you see all the candy in the store shelves are sugar, right? Yeah. It shouldn't be that if you're on a keto diet, you can't have candy. There's got to be sugarless ones, right? So it's like, how do people adapt to that? So we've seen a massive trend in companies and products that are saying, you know, we're going to cut out sugar, we're going to find alternative sweeteners, and use that as a product and create a new product line. So that's really one thing that we've seen. As these different trends pop up in our lifestyle, it's going to change the products around us, and it's going to change the way we like to consume it. And then the companies are forced to change. I think that's the first thing. The second thing, I think we're starting to see, in the first time, I think CPG major companies are always dominant. They've never shrunk. But I think it's the first time they're starting to be like, there's these companies coming up. We're going to have to take a look. We're going to have to see what they're doing. If you look at Pepsi and General Mills, they've created their own incubators, because they're like, you know what, we need to figure out what's innovative. We need to figure out how we kind of keep changing. So they're at a point where they're taking on companies as well. So I think we're at this starting ground where we're seeing more in the US. In Canada, really, there's only 2 food accelerators. In the US, you have a hub in New York, you have a hub in Chicago. So we're like, okay, this is really interesting. But the other thing that no one's talking about is all the food investors, right? It's a very different scene as well, and we're figuring that out right now. So I think the trends that are gonna come is gonna dictate what we sell, but there's gonna be little fun things that people want. So there's one company that we're working with right now. They're doing this alcohol-infused popcorn called Eatable, right? So you're thinking, okay, alcohol-infused popcorn, why? And it's cool, but it's like we don't really know a lot of gourmet popcorn companies. So they're trying to target and say, we're going to be gourmet popcorn, right? Like everything they do is about high scale, kind of really high quality stuff. So when they first brought it to us, we're like, interesting. Don't know if it'll pick up, right? But at the end of the day, it's also like, I don't know what the customers are going to want. So they came back to us in 6 months. They're like, well, we're on track to hit this. We're getting our own manufacturing site because that's how much quantity they're pushing out. And we're like, oh crap. Like at the end of the day, it's also, we can't dictate. I think that's a difference. In technology, you can look at a piece of tech and be like, this is going to be great. And we know it because that's where everything's pushing towards. Let's go on it. For food, they kind of just have to go and test. They have to go, let the market tell them what it is, and then we buy in behind them. But they're one company that we've fallen in love now. Like my fiance, she probably buys the popcorn on a regular. They have this one that's called like champagne on the pop, and it's like a popcorn that is coated in white Belgian chocolate, but it has Pop Rocks in it.
Okay.
So this whole champagne fizzy poppy feel, it's you eat it as the chocolate melts, you get the fizz, and it just really weird little sensations. But it's like, who would have thought to put those things together? So that's the other fun part about this. It's like the combinations they're gonna put together, the creativity they have behind these things.
So
that's gonna be really interesting.
there's alcohol in
They
them?
cook off the alcohol so kids can eat it too.
Okay.
So that's the other part that's like, okay, well, how does that work? And I think we're just gonna see more and more of these. Like we saw the first, probably one of the first, if not the first, gluten-free and sugar-free vitamin. And that's the first product that we've seen in a while that we're like, it's gluten-free because and there's no gelatin in it. That's the biggest thing I think for a lot of folks who
are
who
vegan,
kind of are vegan or halal, whatever it is, right? Like you can have a lot of the gummies sometimes because there's gelatin in it. So this is the first company that we've seen is just completely taking it out. So there's these little things that we don't talk about enough that are such small markets, but that can be adopted. So we're excited about what that's gonna look like as well. And I think it's food is just becoming a trend. Like we see all the pop-up shops and stuff like that. I think it's one of those things that people consistently go, oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. But no one's really like, how do I turn that into a business? How do I turn that into an opportunity? So we think that in the next 3 to 5 years, people are going to start turning their heads a little bit more and putting a little bit more focus on it. And that's going to be really exciting. I think the biggest factor, like I said, is Arlene Dickinson, one of the dragons, saying, you know what, I'm going to purchase this food starter, which went under, and we're going to run our own programming, right? Like for someone of her caliber, of her stature to come into Toronto and say, we're going to build that and we're going to run that here. You can kind of see it's like she sees it as well. So that kind of gave us a validation, right? People are like, well, she's your competitor. We're like, no, it's validation that we're right? Like it's someone in that space who knows exactly what she's doing, coming in and starting. We're like, this is something we're doing.
It just validates the space you're in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Competitors are good.
That's what I said. It's like competition just increases our talent level, increases the way we do programming.
And with incubators and stuff like that, it's also, it becomes like a synergy, right? Where you can support a larger base of potential clients. Because there's more people providing resources, it's actually intrinsic effect where it just build upon each other, right? And you get more companies coming out of it. It's more synergetic for everybody involved.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that people always say, and this is a personal belief, I don't want to say it's a York University belief or anything like that. People are like, well, there's so many incubators, there's too many of us, you guys are all competing. It's not true, right? Like everyone, like when we look at a product life cycle stage, there's ideation, validation, like there's all these different stages. Everyone has a purpose. You just got to figure out what you do really well and stick to it, right? And then that everyone plays their role in an ecosystem. I think that's the one thing that I think people don't notice from an outsider perspective. It's kind of like you guys are all competing. It's like, no, we are very specific to what we do. Like we have us in Markham that's doing what we do, and then we have Venture Lab that's scale up, all right? And then we have small business centers that do the ideation. So like we know our place, and we're like, okay, you need to go here. Like even Seneca Helix.
So where do you fall? You fall in between scale up and startup?
So I would say, yeah, exactly that. I think specifically what we do is we help with, when you're done, a little bit done the validation, you have some proof of concepts and some traction. That's where we come in. So you're about 1 to 2 months from a product launch. We have really good product, and you're like, I have a couple customers, but I don't know how to secure and fulfill these customers, and then launch and raise the first 2 rounds. That's when we typically come in and say, okay, this is how you're going to finish off this customer. This is how you're going to use the metrics to really get more customers. Here's the numbers we need for you to raise your first round of capital. That's usually where we come in. And then a venture lab is more so you're over $1 million in sales. Here's how we help. And then a small business center is like, I have an idea. What do I do? You go to them. They give you mentorship, business model, financial, all that type of stuff. So I think we're in a good space in the region because everyone kind of knows their role and we know how to support one another. So we know, hey, if you're not the right fit for us, go to them. Go to this place, right? So it kind of helps when we have that kind of acknowledgement throughout the ecosystem, because we're not fighting anymore. We're not saying, oh my gosh, we're better than you are. It's just, how do we help each other, and how do we help our community? How do we all grow together? Because the natural path should be, you start an ideation, you go to validation, traction, scale. So we're just pushing them along, every single one of us. So that's kind of the philosophy we want to go with, and it's worked well for us, I think.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be a York University student to be at YSpace.
No, I think that's one of the biggest thing that people think. It's like, well, you're a part of York University, you're funded, I have to be a York student. No, I think on the contrary, we have 27 companies, like I said. I hate to say this, but 25 companies are not from York.
Yeah.
We have 2 student companies, and that's it. And even if they're a student company, one is on track to do about $750,000 this year. The other one does about $12,000 a month, right? So it's like, even if you're a student, we're looking at it as saying a business. We don't care if you're a student, not a student. We're like, is the business good, and can we help you scale? So the 25 companies that we have really come from all over the place. The interesting part, I think, it's even though we're located in Markham, is we're close enough to the highways. We actually get a large majority of our companies from North York and downtown Toronto. So when I first opened, I was like, why would people drive up here? I'll be honest, I make that drive every day. So it's like, it's not that bad. And I think now we're starting to see, like, as long as we have the right programming and the right culture in place, people are willing to come. And that's what we've kind of started testing out. We have, being in Markham, we have 3 Markham companies. Like, that's about it, right? So it's kind of like, it's also like, just because we started realizing where you're located doesn't matter. People are willing to come if it's the right place.
Yeah.
I think that's been our main focus right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, like, you're not just focused on these CPG brands. Like, food and beverages is new.
Yeah, that's
right?
new.
So how do you pre-qualify the companies you want to work with?
So typically for us right now, a company will reach out to us. We'll send them to our application. Then it's an application form that goes through your business model, how much you're making, your churn, and all that type of stuff. And then we do 3 steps. So we do a phone call, a face interview, and then a pitch. The phone call is for us to do any deep dives into the business if we just are unclear. Sometimes we skip it if everything in the application is super clear, we really get it. Then we just go straight to the face-to-face. And the face-to-face for us, it's not even to talk about the business. It's just to get to know the founders and the team. One of the biggest things we always said is it's when we have a space, a physical location, anything like this, it's about the people in it. It's about the culture you build and how collaborative you are. So we meet everyone just to make sure that they're not jerks. They're not going to come in and disrupt and bring this negativity into the space. So we spend about 45 minutes with them just to get to know them, personal life, business, everything about who they are as a team and the culture, and see how they interact with one another as well. And then if we feel good about the team, we feel the synergies, we'll bring them back for a pitch with our mentors as well as our other kind of selection committee. And then typically at that point, it's when we do a business dive. So it's like, is there value both ways? Do we see the value we can provide for you? Do we see what value you can get and how you can uplift this entire community? Then we'll bring them in, and then it's 2 months of free membership, and then they pay $350 per person per month afterwards.
Awesome. So $350 per person per month. So you're like a paid space, more like a co-working space with incubation.
Yeah. So
resources.
We've gone asked for, hey, can we just rent a desk? We say no, like it's only for select companies. And I'll be honest, when we looked at the $350, everyone's like, some people think it's super cheap, and some people think it's expensive.
Yeah.
Depends on who you ask. But I think for us, it's like, at the end of the day, we have to operate somehow, right? Like, we're fully funded by the university, which is great. But when you look at the landscape of what's happening in universities, funding cuts here, there, it's like, we have to figure out a way to sustain ourselves. So the way that we like to look at it is, we're lucky to be a part of a university, but we're a startup in ourselves, right? We have to figure out our sustainability model in the next 3 to 5 years, because if, lo and behold, something happens, a university comes back to us in 2 weeks and say, funding's cut everything's gone. How do we sustain ourselves? We're probably gonna have to shut down, right?
Yeah.
But at least this way we can start looking at how do we build some revenue structure into our system, and it helps us scale up a little bit. So if we're consistently getting funding from the university, we can use that slush fund to grow something else, provide additional support, hire additional support.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing, but I think 350, it's pretty subsidized. Like I look
How
at
does it work?
WeWork and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's like $700, $800. So for what we're offering, I think it's fair. Yeah.
How's the government support been? I know there's been a lot of funding cuts provincially.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the innovation center, you're not part of the One Network, are you?
We're so the university is a part of the One Network in the sense that there is what we call a CLA, Campus Link Accelerator. So there are still some supports from them. So OCE, Ontario Center.
So
of
you're a
Excellence.
CLA.
Yeah.
Campus Link
So
Accelerator.
that's been fantastic, and they're still supporting us, and they give us different grants for kind of hiring students as well as different things. I think for us more specifically, we primarily work with the York region. And that's just because of where we are, and we're probably one of 2 incubators in York region. When you look at Toronto, it's about 50.
Yeah.
So we have the luxury to be able to pick up the phones and call the municipalities, call the mayors, and call the different economic development offices and say, hey, we need support here. What does this look like? They're super receptive. They've been probably one of the better government bodies to work with. I know there's a whole notion that things are really slow and all this. I think what we found is in these smaller kind of, if you want to say smaller city and towns, once you find the right people, they're hungry. They have that same mentality. It's like an underdog mentality, which I think is what I like. It's throughout the region. You can see it. Everyone has this underdog mentality that everyone talks about Toronto and how great Toronto is, but then they're kind of like, well, hey, we're here. We're like, why aren't you talking about us? So they have this mentality where they're like, we have to get out of that shadow, and we're going to do everything we can. So the hustle and the grind, I think, yes, people see in Toronto because you see just the sheer amount of people. You just assume everyone's hustling and bustling, but I think in the region in itself, in the government bodies, we see it on day to day just by how much they're pushing out, how much content they're pushing, how much efforts they're doing. Like I've never seen a government body have their own marketing arm almost, which it works with us. So they're called YorkLink, and they are the economic development office for the region. They pull in all the corporates and stuff like that, but the amount of kind of traction they have online has been insane. So anytime we need something done, we just go to them and like, hey, can you help us promote this? And they'll help us promote it, and we'll get thousands of hits. So that's been really great as well.
Yeah.
So we're lucky with that.
So this is York region,
Yeah.
right? So
It's massive.
it's a massive area right north of Toronto.
Yeah.
And the thing with the York region is that, especially with Markham and Richmond Hill area, it's a technology center. It used to be before Toronto was the startup capital, before the innovation capital. I think it's like 4th or 3rd in the world as a region for innovation. York region was known as a high-tech capital of Canada.
It still is.
It still is.
Yeah.
Right, and you have all these like more traditional high-tech companies. Like AMG's there, IBM is there.
Yeah.
Right, and that really fostered a different kind of community.
Yeah.
And kind of like what's a little different from, I guess, Toronto versus York region is you see a lot of these companies form from ex-employees of these older technology companies. They go in there, they learn problem sets that's happening in the industries, they come out and they innovate. And then, but a lot of those times they exit by selling that innovation or that company back to those older firms or other firms, and that becomes an innovation cycle within its own. And traditionally, hasn't been a lot of bigger companies, like more global brands that came out of the region. Or am I wrong here? Like, has there been any big companies that come out of the region?
I think there's a couple things. I think you're right in a sense there has been as many, but when there is, the other challenge is, I'll be honest, as a region, whether it's the companies, whether it's the municipality, it doesn't matter. We're just not very good at telling our story. Yeah. Like, if the smallest thing happens in Toronto, you hear about it. Yeah. Everyone hears about it, right? It's like there's companies that are, like there's a company in Vaughan called Daisy Intelligence. So last year at Elevate, they won the $1 million cash prize for the AI challenge, right? Amazing. And it's like, no one's talked about it. Yeah. And it's like, why? Yeah. We got this Vaughan company that's not in Toronto, but they're branding themselves as Toronto, who win this competition, who does supply chain logistics through AI, who are doing massive sales. No one's talking about being from Vaughan, from the region. So I think a lot of times what we see is that even if they go internationally, they're saying Toronto's my home. Yeah. It's also just the global recognition of Toronto. So I think that's just part of the challenge, is that there's, whether we want to say it's pride or whatever it is, people are just not saying we're from this area. We're not proud to be from a Vaughan, from a Markham. We're from Toronto. So that's kind of diluting all the positive news that's coming out of there. I think the other piece is, I would say not only Toronto, in Canada, that culture of building to sell and building to be this global giant just doesn't happen a lot. I think
we're a lot conservative in our growth.
We are, and it stems all the way down to our investment dollars, to the government, like everything about us, like corporates, right? Like if you go to the U.S., yes, and I hate to keep comparing it, but it's just a different culture down there. You get this, we always hear these companies that say, oh, our government's pushing these small companies to help support these corporates. Then the corporates come back and say, you know what, we want to support you. We don't know how. There's too much infrastructure change we have to do, and this and that. You hear 1,000 excuses. In the States, it's kind of, if they like you, they're like, sign the check, let's start tomorrow. There's not that layer of infrastructure, and I don't know who to blame for that, to be honest. I think it's a bit of everything, but that's also the culture that's in the States. In the States, it's these massive headquarters are looking at companies saying, how do I buy you out now? How do I buy you out now? How do I buy you out now? And part of the time, it's acquisition of talent. It just doesn't exist here. Like here, it's people build a lifestyle company. That's what I mainly find. It's people are not building the next unicorn, being like, I'm going to sell this or go IPO. People are building a lifestyle business. People want to say, I just want a nice business that I run on my own and I can live the rest of my life and have a good income, right? So that mentality is a little bit different. And the ones who are, to be honest, building that unicorn in Canada, most of them go to the States. Very few don't. Like a Shopify is one of them that like didn't. And you see how well they're doing, right? Like a Wealth Simple. Like you're starting to see it. And I think a part of it is those founders are people who either been in the States, saw the culture and bringing it back, or they're starting here and they've always had that mindset. So we're starting to see more of it, but I think to your point, it'll take a couple more years.
Yeah, Canada always had this brain drain, right? Like if you're doing anything of worth, you go to the south, right? To the States where there's like the market is literally 10 times the population, 1,000 times the market potential, and much more dollars there, much more capital, like way more, like infinitely more than in Canada, right? Almost exponentially more. But like we see the reverse of it now. There's been a switch, right? It's maybe because a lot of factors, right? So originally the excuse was in the dollar. We're like 30 cents discount for your American dollar. Come here, you can get more bang for your buck, and that might have been the transition factor, but it's become the talent pool also. One of the most interesting things is, even though we're 10 times less the population of the States, per capita we actually produce more innovators. And and a lot of that is because of our like semi-socialist system, funny enough, right? That we create more capitalists because people are more willing to take more risk. So the stats are, I think like it's 26% more likely to have someone become an innovator in Canada, like because if they're like 28 and they have a new family, and they quit their job, they don't lose their health benefits, right? Because we have paid healthcare, right? We have universal healthcare. Just those factors have allowed people to take risks more easily. But it's funny, because those people who take those risks move to the States after to expand upon their potential. But for now, for multiple reasons, those people are staying here, and like you said, a lot of people are coming back with the knowledge learned, with the connections they make into the city, and you've seen the explosion of growth here based off of that. A lot of SF companies, San Francisco, from the Valley kind of companies, are moving here for that reason, because we already had the talent pool, and the talent pool is staying here now, right? The capital is more effective, and the community is just growing.
When you look at AI, like everyone's like, AI is the hot topic. Like AI was born here. Right? Like that's what everyone is not talking about. It's like AI is born here. You got the hub in Toronto, you got the hub in Montreal. It's probably two of the hottest hubs. So if you're any company, which pretty much is anybody in the world, is going to AI, you're coming to these two cities to attract the talents and pull. So like to your point, that's exactly what it is. People are starting to see what Canada can produce. But I'll be honest as well, Canada's not very good at telling our story. I think we have a lot of great innovators, a lot of great people, but we aren't very good. So I think it's just whole shift of everyone's got to do a little bit better at being, I hate to say it, but it's just having a bit of a confidence, right? Like it's okay to have a little ego. It's okay to go and boast a little bit and be like, you know what, this is how great I am. Yeah, this is how great our country is. This is how great what we're doing is. You don't really see that. People are very like timid here, it feels like. So I'm naturally American. So I say this because I'm born there, come here, and I'm like, people are like, not everyone, but it just seems like a cultural thing. It's like people shame you when you're like too proud of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, it's like, keep going, let's do it. It's like that whole culture needs to shift a little bit and needs to change a little bit. Like, and I think we're gonna start seeing it as parents and everyone else get to understand what entrepreneurship means, right? I think the funny story I usually always tell people, I'm like, going into entrepreneurship, and goes back to like how I started this. So I went to Ryerson for entrepreneurship. So I graduated, worked on my own company for 2 years, right? And then I went back to DMZ. So I kid you not, for the first 4 years of my career, my mom thought I was volunteering. Mom thought I didn't have a job. She thought I was broke. She's like, I don't know how you're gonna pay your loans. I don't know what you're gonna do.
So this is when you're where?
When I just graduated.
Okay.
When I had my own company where we were doing sales, we were licensing, and we built curriculum, and we were doing fine. And then I left that, went back to DMZ, so at Ryerson, and then worked there building programs. But because I was showing up to work in jeans, t-shirt, and sneakers, my mom's like, you don't have a job. Just tell me, like, it's okay you don't have a job. I still love you and all that. And I'm like, no, I have a job. She was like, no, it's okay. Like, just tell me. And the entire family thought that, because they're like, in their mindset, and maybe it's an Asian culture thing, they're like, if you're not in a suit, if you're not in a dress shirt, you're not working, right? You're not really working. So she thought I was volunteering. And then I went from that to going to New York, and she's like, oh, now he finally got a job. He's switching, he's not actually at school, so like it's not a volunteer thing anymore. I still show up in jeans and a t-shirt. And she was like, what's going on? I thought you got a job at a university. I was like, I did, but this is what I do, right? And it's the culture we have is everyone shows up in jeans and t-shirts, and it's just a very different culture. And I think people don't understand that, at least the generation before us. Some do, and it's great. When your parents understand it, it's great. When you can explain it. The other challenge was trying to explain that in Chinese. I had no idea how to say it. Like, I'll be honest. It's like, I think last year a show came out on TVB, which is like a Chinese channel, and it was like, this is like entrepreneurship, innovation, and startups. I was like, Mom, watch that show. It's like, why? I was like, because that guy, that's what I do. Just watch that show. Now you'll know why I was in t-shirts and jeans for the past 4 years. Did
it work?
It did. And she started telling all the families. So the entire family watched it now. And now everyone gets what I do, which is like fantastic, right? And then the challenge now is, my fiance, she's Vietnamese, so her family's asking what I do. I was like, damn it, I need to find the show in Vietnamese. Like, I need to find the same show in Vietnamese and get them to watch it. But I think that's going to start shifting, because the next generation, we all get it now. We all understand what it is. So when our kids tell us that we want to go into entrepreneurship, we're really like, okay, this is how you're going to do it. This is how you're going to get set up. Whereas when I was starting my company, I had no idea what I was doing. It was trial and error. Like, I was lucky because we had an angel investor in the beginning that said, I love the idea, I love the concept, I like what you do, here's a pot of money. So we got lucky. But I don't think everyone's that lucky, because the other challenge that I don't think people talk enough about is, in entrepreneurship, is just about like your personal financial state. I hate to say it, and maybe this is going to draw a lot of negativity or whatever, but a lot of people say, like, if you're starting a company, it's because you have a little cushion in the background, right? Like, you don't have to support your family. You're okay. Like, your family's good. And that was one thing that I think is potentially true, right? Like, a lot of people who start their companies don't have to worry about, okay, am I going to help my mom pay her mortgage? Am I going to have to have these bills in the back of my mind? Because you're not working like 3-4 part-time jobs to help make up the bill at home. So for me, even like when I was starting, that entrepreneurship wasn't really an option because of that side. But when I got money from someone, I'm like, now I can do it.
Absolutely.
But not many people get that opportunity. I think when you hear about Trump's and all these people, I think Trump got like $1 million to start his company or something. And it's like, that'd be nice. Right. So I think that's the other side that people don't talk about enough. It's hard to start a company because of everything you have going on personally.
Absolutely.
So every time I talk to someone who's looking to start, I'm like, look at your personal life and then figure it out. Talk to your family first.
I mean, it's great you mentioned that, because you're absolutely right. Like, I feel like you have to have enough struggle in life in some aspect, like either by wanting, like you want to do something great, and you're not satisfied with your R, that drives you to do all these crazy things. But like, you also have to have that cushion where you get comfortable taking a risk. And a lot of people don't have that cushion.
No.
And it's interesting because like innovation is so important to the economy. It's so important to, I think, the future of work. Where I don't think people have normal jobs anymore, because machines are eating up like just static, the day-to-day processes of things. But people can invent new things, right? New products, new services, new ways of doing things, new processes. That's the innovation economy right there. to know, everybody benefits from that. And
Yeah.
it becomes a numbers game. You want more people providing more
Yeah.
solutions for the economy. And it's one of the reasons why like UBI, I think is so interested, right? Like universal basic income.
Yeah.
Any kind of way that we can give some kind of standardized payment to everybody.
Yeah.
And if you look at a lot of like these private companies, they're interested in this because they get it. Because they're like, okay, yeah, like the what computing is like eating up the world, right? And as that happens and opportunities get less, people need something to give that kind of cushion where they can take that experimental risk of changing their career paths, of trying to chase the problems that they want to go after. And it actually benefits everybody if more people are trying to build these things.
Yeah, I think to your point, we're starting to see corporates take that on as a challenge too.
Yeah.
So TD, for example, like they did this community fund where it's called the Upskilling Grant, where they gave organizations who are upskilling people to be ready for the new wave of work $1 million to create a 10-year program.
Yeah.
And that's great to see because to your point, as technology takes over, there's going to be a new wave of jobs that are coming out. And you do need to upskill people, right? A lot of people are used to hands-on, very simple in and out types of work, but it's not going to be everyone. So I think that's going to be the biggest thing. And I think the other thing that we're starting to see more in entrepreneurship, sorry, just to go back a little bit as well, it's one thing I do want to say for sure, it's we need to stop telling students to become entrepreneurs. I work in a university. I love my university. I love Ryerson, my alma mater, but we need to stop telling students to become entrepreneurs because of exactly that reason, that there's the cushion and everything else and not the mental state and your family. But if we look at it, the real successful entrepreneurs really most of the times are the ones who's worked in the workforce a little bit, who saved up a little bit. They've planned this out a little bit more and they just go so much faster. Like I don't know, like not many 20, 21-year-olds will graduate knowing exactly what they're going to want to do. Some do, right? Like if you're for example, in research and you come across this great technology and you can license, sell it, great, because that's a different scenario. But if you're someone who's just trying to start brand new, work a little bit, figure out what you like to do. But to go back in terms of the corporate side of things, I think what we're starting to see a lot is corporates coming back out and being like, how can we support this change? And the government's doing it too. So I think it's great to see the recognition of people going back and supporting that side of things, because it is a concern for a lot of people, and maybe not for us who can adapt, who can learn on the fly and really figure things out. But for some of the older generations who are really close to retirement, maybe it's like, how do they get that gap? How do they fill it a little bit more? And I think that's one thing that is going to be worrying for some people. We had new immigrants as well. I think now it's going to be harder and harder for them to find jobs. And then people say, well, you got the McDonald's, you got the Tim Hortons, they're being replaced.
Yeah.
Right? It's
the
like
kiosks.
You look at the kiosk and like we have a company that literally does that for the kiosk. And I'm like, we're supporting that. So they got to figure out. So it's like everything's going to get to the point where it's just going to get, the skill level is going to be higher and higher for what we need. So I think there needs to be a little bit more of a reflection of that during some of the training. Like there's language training right now, which is great for new immigrants, right? But maybe it's time to think about like the basics of Excel, like things like that are very tangible, that they can at least maybe get an office job, an administration job that they can do. And maybe those will become the new kind of base level jobs almost, but that's okay. And I mean, with English, maybe they can go out and go into like sales and stuff, but like that's hard when you're competing against everyone else who's like, who grew up in this country are looking to do sales as well. So I think we're going to see more shift and we're going to see more dollars flowing in. I can't imagine stopping the dollars from flowing because it's the feedback for what they're doing is great. We work with Seneca, and Seneca is a part of the upskilling program. So I think they were telling us they do these virtual trainings. I think in their first session, they got like 250 people. And we're like, that's insane. Like 250 on a session that no one even knew you would maybe even get 10. Like we all were like, maybe 10, maybe 20. And he's like, nope, the numbers are 250 viewed for the whole duration of 3 hours. And we're like, that is pretty wild.
And these courses are based on innovation?
No, it's just based on like how to upskill your skills. Like how do you get more skills for certain things? So basic functionality of Excel, PowerPoint, how do you do data entry and analyzing like maybe VLOOKUPs and stuff. So it's like very basic skills for you and I, if we went to school, right? It's like very basic, or things that we can look and learn. But for some of them, they're like, we don't even know where to start, and it's intimidating. So that was really interesting to see kind of the feedback that they're getting. So I can only imagine there's going to be more companies like the TDs and the government's coming out saying, here's some funds, upskill your employees, upskill the community. that's going to be huge.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things. Like we're pretty much in the midst of like the fourth industrial revolution, whereas before it was like steam and engines and industrialization. Now it's about like computer power, computation. Like I think one of the interesting trends is like, I think like Citibank just 30, 40 years ago was hiring like almost 80,000, 100,000 people across the world to run his investment portfolios, right? Do the research and all that kind of stuff. Now, all of that, their investment portfolio pretty much goes down to the hands of 4 people because they have all the computing power required to automate the process. Accountants 20, 30 years ago were like pretty much number crunchers, just moving Excel columns manually from one place to another. And it goes up the chain to the financer who now has these Excel sheets that have been formatted properly for them to actually do functionality. Now, this computing is allowed to do it automatically, right? So the skill sets have 100% changed, where it's not knowing about those hard skills, those IQ points, where you can compute yourself, but no, how to interface with the computer better to augment your own skills. How do you use the computation skills that the software provides to better make yourself, I guess, as a more formidable, right, in the market space. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. There's not a lot of training for that.
No, I think it's that, and it's still like not everyone loves interfacing with computers. Right? Yeah. That's the other challenge. Like we do it assuming that everyone's gonna love it. It's gonna be fine. I think the thing that people are not thinking about is those professions, and I think a lot of people are like, well, teachers and stuff like that, there's overabundance. That is true, but there's other professions that require empathy. And I think those are the professions that are never going to change. No matter what you do, a robot will never replace the empathy of a human. To be able to connect, have conversations. And I think those are the one things that I think maybe it's time to take a deeper look in how do we create more of those, right? Like people talk about all these different things that robots can do, but I don't know. I just feel like there's going to be, even with that, we're gonna see negatives out of it, and and someone's gonna have to come in and figure out, okay, well, we can create a whole new job segment out of this. So that's the other side, I think. And the other thing that people are not talking about, it's when you think about computation and stuff, is eSports and gaming. It's like that market is just insane right now. So I think what we're gonna start seeing is more skills in that than anything else, and I think internationally especially, I think we're going to see a lot more. I think if people are going to be coming over, whatever it is, like the fact that Fortnite had $3 million tournament, I found that insane. And it also kind of makes me think, I'm like, and I think the second place winner, I think I was reading the article and it was like second place winner said his mom had thrown his computer, so he had to go get a new one. I'm like, can you imagine if that kid just quit? He won like 1 point something million. Like, imagine if that kid just quit. So it's we just don't know what's going to happen and what's going to boom, and I think that's going to be an exciting thing about the next 5 to 10 years. Like, what are the industries that are going up, what people are doing. Now, the scary thing is with all these scholarships for gaming and stuff. I say scary, but probably exciting for a lot of people. It's like, I'm just thinking like in the future when I have kids, I'm like, I can't tell them not to play video games anymore. You really can't. You got to be like, maybe you have a career. Maybe you're amazing. I will never know, but you got to play. So I think that's going to be the interesting. It's like it almost makes me think like what my parents thought entrepreneurship was stupid. I'm going to be like, I thought gaming would have been, right? But now I'm like, I can't say that. And who knows what's the next thing? There's always going to be these little things that pop up that we're all going to be like, we're going to question, we're going to doubt, but you just don't know what's going to actually turn into a viable career in today's day and age where technology is everything. So that I think will be really interesting. I think for me, it's time to play more video games probably.
I mean, I think it's just a different way of interacting with people and producing content, right? Like streaming online, like is communicating to a wider audience in a different format. Like people are not just watching shows anymore; they're watching other players play a game. They're not even right. And it's still a growing trend.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just the beginning, and like I think Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj had an episode on the eSports, right? E-gaming, right? And he had this chart that showed how big of a market is. It's way bigger than the NFL, NHL, NBA, all put together, combined. And like that puts into perspective how much money is being channeled here. Perfect. Slight technical difficulties. Got to change your battery.
It happens.
All right. So back to that conversation. Like a lot of things are happening definitely in the space. Back to like the region, right?
Yeah.
This is something that really gets to me. So, oops. Yeah. So when it comes to like Toronto being like AI capital and stuff, I found out like a lot of the AI companies are mostly in the West End, right? Is that true, false?
I'll be honest, I think they're everywhere.
Yeah, little sporadically.
Well, the other thing is Toronto real estate is just getting so insane. It's like for you to rent an office, it's nearly impossible, right? Like the rents is getting so insane that I think people are moving towards the outskirts. But I think as a university and as innovation hubs, that's where the opportunities are going to come. There's really no innovation centers in the suburban areas, right? And no one's perfected what that model looks like.
Yep.
You can't tell me a downtown Toronto is going to work in the suburban area because your foot traffic's not the same. The acquisition of talent and access is not the same. Like one of our biggest struggle is access to talent. Like I joke with people, but it's not a joke. Like our founders drive every day 9:30 for pickup of his co-ops and drops them off at 4:30 at bus stations. That's because he has to. Right? The transit is not the best. In Toronto, it doesn't matter. They come in and go whenever they want. So everyone's gonna have these little unique challenges. I think that's going to be the biggest thing, but I think these companies are popping on the outskirts, and the reason why we're starting to know more about them is because people are starting to become more adapt to it, like saying, let's just tell people about what we do. So I think whether it's more on the west end, the east end, it doesn't really surprise me, to be honest with you. I'll be honest, there's probably some all the way up in Georgina that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
Like it's just about finding them out at this point.
I know Barrie is doubling down as a city on innovation.
Oh yeah.
Right, like there's
Durham. I think Durham actually has an AI hub now.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like Durham. Like what? So.
We're also hearing that was the GM plant in Durham that closed down. It's being converted into a facility to help with innovation, especially in the automotive space too.
It doesn't surprise me because Oshawa, so at EOIT, they have this climatic testing facility, right? It's like one of the only ones in Canada. I think it's the only one in Canada and one of the 3 in the world, like to be able to test any climate for vehicles, right? And it's like, why aren't we talking about that? Like it's something we need to be sharing more.
They also have this industrial 3D printing facility, right? You can 3D print an entire car, like it's metal printed. Everything but the engine can be pretty much printed out. So you can rapid prototype almost any kind of engineered facility, and it's completely accessible for like startups or anyone who's interested in working with that facility. You gotta log in a time and work with them.
There's so many things I think we're still getting to know. That's I think the power of the network and the community. It's like people like yourselves who are willing to share that and tell people that. It's like that's something I didn't know, right? So it's like now I can go back to a startup who needs that and be like, hey, go talk to and go do this. So it's like, how do we do all these things together as a group and as a collective? And I think that's what's gonna matter. Like
because we're still so fragmented.
Oh my god! I mean, if you look at York region, it doesn't even show you. There's 9 different towns and cities in there. It's not that big.
Huge.
I don't know why there's 9.
I
always look at it. I'm like, I feel like I'm driving, and it's like the split between Aurora and Newmarket just baffles me. Like, I don't get it. It's literally like a young line split. I'm like, what was the point of that? Like, so I'm not in politics. I'm not going to try to be, but it's like there's these like it's almost like we don't need this many mayors and like just hate to say it, but put something together, make it a little bit bigger, but then we have more resources. We're a bigger community now.
I think that'd be interesting if the GTA region becomes like an actual one true hypercity, right?
Yeah, that would be really interesting, right? It's things like that. Things that are out of our control, but you kind of want to see what that would look like. You want to see what that would look like, really, and I think we haven't seen it. Like you kind of know in the States, each city has its own little flavor. I still think, even though Toronto is like such a high tourism city, I still think it's trying to figure out what that flavor is, right? Like I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like there's nothing about Toronto that's like, this is it. Like, this is what they're amazing at. I feel like we're great at so many things, but I'm still waiting to see, like, what's that going to be one thing that they're going to be just kick butt and everything in? And maybe it'll be sports with everything that's been happening, but I don't know.
I mean, Toronto's blowing up right now for, like, what's it, film? Right?
Film's huge.
Startups, entertainment, right?
Yeah.
There's about 2-3 film production centers coming up.
Yeah,
right?
there's actually one in Markham.
Yeah.
It's like I think it's called First Markham Studio, and it's massive. It's like they're calling it like Hollywood of the North. Like, it's gonna be beautiful. But it's like, I think what I'm curious to see in the next couple of years is gonna be how everyone's gonna adopt to that.
Yeah.
With everything else that's changing. I think technology is gonna be one piece of it.
Yeah. And like Markham is doubling down on the 1,000-acre property. Was it innovation center?
Like
innovation
600
zone?
soccer fields. I think that's the terminology he used. Yeah.
600 soccer fields.
Yeah.
An area all for innovation.
Yeah.
How does that look like, and what does that mean? What area is it again? The Keel?
You gotta ask the mayor. I think it's Elgin Mills and Warden. I want to say. I think it might be Elgin Mills. Yeah, I think it's Elgin Mills and Warden. So it's like right there. If you go closer to the highway, because what they said, it was right off the highway. And the whole vision, I think it's that lot of land. What they essentially want to do is bringing a big corporate, like similar to like an IBM. Oh yeah, it's definitely one of those empty lands.
Yeah.
They want to bring in like an IBM,
like an anchor tenant.
Yeah, an anchor tenant, and build around it. I think what they're trying to do is build something to what, not like a downtown Markham has built. I think that's what they want, like an area where it's kind of like its own little satellite. I think the other piece of it is looking at the way that Google and Apple has built it in like San Francisco. And it's like, how do they copy some of that stuff?
Yeah.
So I think that's what they want to do. I'll be honest, the mayor has some crazy ideas, and if anyone can do it, it's him.
Yep.
Like he's probably one of the most supportive people I know.
Yeah.
And it's great to have someone like that in our backyard, just to be able to support some of the things we do. Like some of the things that we think is crazy, he kind of comes up to it and said, just do it. Like, why is it crazy? It's only crazy if you think it's crazy. If you make it happen, it's not, right? So he's such a strong believer that, I'll be honest, whatever he has in his head, I'm sure it's insane. I'm sure his staff says it's insane, but if anyone can do it, he can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things I'm interested in, because like all the different zones where things are happening, like you said, like Durham region has a lot of manufacturing technologies going on.
Yeah.
Even like Coburg and like Western, Northern Ontario, right? Like has what's it, N100, $100,000 pitch competition.
Yeah.
It happens biannually. I mean, so every 2 years.
Yeah.
Where they give 4 companies 100,000, one gets 250,000.
Yeah, it's something insane.
That's
right?
crazy. Even Sudbury has like an innovation center now. Yeah,
I
Sudbury
didn't know
has
that.
innovation zone there, manufacturing technologies they focus on.
See,
But-
there's these little pockets that we just don't know.
Yeah, so these pockets are like popping up. But like 5 years ago, we started talking about the high-tech corridor, right, between Kitchener and Toronto.
Yeah.
Where the idea was to build, like, give incentives for companies to come and build headquarters from Kitchener to Toronto to literally drive traffic. And just like Silicon Valley, where it's like a valley connecting a whole bunch of cities, where all these high-tech companies come and flourish that promote and build a startup ecosystem around themselves. We're trying to do that here too. And it was a combination of like private and public partnerships trying to make that happen. But still, we see a lot of pockets, right? There's still not a lot of collaboration. So even with Kitchener and Toronto trying to be forced together and be pulled, right? York region is different. Durham is doing his own thing, right?
I'm just thinking food, like even looking at that. So Guelph has a massive food play, and Barrie does. How do we make a little triangle there? Like, look at them. I've never thought about it until I looked on the map. I'm like, I think, and then, I mean, of course, when you go to Niagara, there's just wine. Yeah. Wine Central and Prince Edward County. I think between Kitchener and Toronto, the thing that's nice about it now is they're actually expanding it out. I think that's a really nice part. It's like they're including Montreal in a conversation. Especially with the Hyperloop and all the hype around that. Yep. And then Ottawa is being looped in the conversation. So I think they're starting to get it. I think the challenge with just being Kitchener and Toronto is that, yes, it's 2 very strong anchor points, but it's not enough. It's not a good representation of the whole ecosystem, and I think that's what they're starting to understand.
So there was this analyst I was listening to. He made this thing about like how the world is pretty much, there's only 14 global regions where there's innovations happening large, where like most of the productivity is coming out of these regions. Okay. And in the next 50 to 80 years, it's going to shape the dynamics of the world. And in Asia, you see countries and regions working together to foster this connection.
Yeah.
Whereas North America, it's been like a stagnant kind of forces
Yeah.
preventing the integration of these.
Yeah.
But one of the main regions, hyper regions, is everything from Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, London, Detroit to Chicago. Like if you look at this region, right,
Oh,
there's
that'd be really
so much
interesting.
happening here,
Yeah.
right? Especially in like this region around here,
Oh, yeah.
connecting all this, from healthcare
You
technologies
can even go down to
to
New York, right? As you go, you can even go
agencies.
down to New York.
Yeah,
It's I think I agree with you. I mean, the thing that we've seen is like I think China almost has this like I don't care attitude, right? Like they do whatever they want, and
Yeah.
the rest of the world can take a look at it. I think
they go after 100-year plans. Okay,
Oh,
how's it
yeah,
going to look
like,
100 years from now? Okay, we'll invest in that.
It's even like I went to, like I think it's even just Asia because I went to Vietnam last year, and Vietnam you think it's a third world country and all this type of stuff, which it could be. Like there's certain pockets that definitely is, but we went to this one city named Da Nang, and I kid you not, I thought I landed in Miami. Like it was just insane. Like the technology infrastructure they have there, the incubators they have there, like they have almost had one at like every other street corner.
Right.
And some of the companies that were coming out that you talked about, and I was on vacation, but I'm naturally curious enough to go visit. And I'm talking to these guys, I'm like, this doesn't like everything they built in the city. That's literally the one place where I didn't even feel like I was in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Like everyone spoke English. It was so multicultural. So I think we're gonna see more in that in these what we think are third world developing countries. That it's gonna be little pockets, but I think they've also been very smart in knowing what they do really well. So like the Philippines and Vietnam has really become a developers hub. They have all these developers that can do the same work for half the labor, and I won't lie, a lot of our companies are doing it. They send a team over there. Like I think one of our companies has his CTO. He's been there for 6 months, and I'm like, what's it like? He's like,
Yeah.
well, I have a team of 5, I live like a king, and it probably is costing me about 2 months of what it would cost me here. I'm like, you can't beat that. So I think this regional infrastructure is going to have some international plays into it. And it's about where people want to go. It's definitely an interesting time as well with everything that's happening between the States and China. That's going to be an interesting play as well, because then as you kind of say, go into like the Detroit, the Chicago, the New York, that whole play of how U.S. and China are going to lay out, I think makes Canada a very good position. Right? Like we're going to be the one that everyone goes to instead of the U.S. now. Everyone's going to want to come and do research development. Like a company like Huawei, which is known for their R&D, I'm sure all their R&D that's in the States is being pushed up here now.
Yep.
So it's like, how do we capitalize on some of those things that are happening politically, and looking at that as an infrastructure play for us to build something more. There's going to be a lot more. I think Canada's positioned in a very good way. I think Toronto specifically is positioned in a very good way. I think the only challenge is Toronto just needs more space. Like it needs to find more space. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they got to find something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think space is definitely an issue. And it's funny when you talk about the global reach of like Canadian brands. So out in PEI, Startup Zone, run by Patrick Farrar. Startup Zone, I was talking to them earlier this year, they have 77 startups working there out of that zone. And just, I think this month, they've expanded into another city. They've opened up a second location.
Wow.
Right, it's government funded,
Yep.
like accelerator or incubator, or a little bit of both. But 77 tech companies are coming out of there, but like they're focused on rural tech, which is interesting. So literally one of the companies that are out of it is like smart lobster traps, right? So like IoT kind of enabled lobster traps will give feedback if it's against like a lobster or not. Not really sure how it works, but the interesting thing was like they were looking into, okay, how do we get support from more of from like the traditional innovation zone, like how to connect Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa to PEI. But what he realized was that it's more interesting to connect Asia, because Asia is focusing, the market for rural technologies is much broader there, because they're focusing on the same kind of things. So rather than focus on Toronto companies, they're actually making partnerships with like incubators in India and all across South Asia that are focusing on similar kind of problem sets and interfacing together and utilizing the market need there versus the infrastructure here for innovation together, right? And that's interesting how it's all interconnecting and coming together.
Yeah, I think what we've seen a lot of is there's so many, like, I think some of the best companies in Toronto don't sell in Toronto. And that's for a multitude of reasons, right? Like you said, and I think people make the notion that, oh, we have to go to Toronto, or we have to be in Toronto to be successful. You don't. You don't. There's a whole world out there figure out what works for you. I think like we look at Wattpad and what Wattpad's doing. I'm like, realistically, I think their number one clientele is in Malaysia. Like, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like these companies are that type. I think Asia is probably just, if you think of population wise, Asia is massive.
Massive.
And I think but it's a monster in its own as well. I think what we usually tell companies is be careful when you go, but if you can make it, you make it, right? It's one of those, and I think we're lucky in that Canada has trade commissioners that can actually walk you through what the ecosystem and the culture looks like. So whenever we have companies going over, we say connect with this trade commissioner, and they're going to walk you through what it actually is going to look like there. Because the other thing that people don't talk about is some of the investments, when you go investment overseas, it can get tricky, right? There's different deals, different structures, especially when you're in someone else's like kind of like working culture, you don't really understand it. There's a lot of things you'd be very careful of, and we've seen certain things gone wrong. Like in Markham, we're building up this trust because if you look up, there wasn't investment scams, and it exists. Like I think there was a massive one in Markham. So in our first year, it took us a while just to reconnect with the community and say, no, we're not a scam. We're part of university. If we get you dollars, it's real dollars. Because it's someone came in, I think it was somewhere in the millions that they scammed some companies. And it's kind of like when that happens in a small community, and Markham's not that small, but it's still small.
Yeah.
It makes everyone aware, and everyone just doesn't.
So
trust
what was the scam that happened?
I don't remember exactly, but it was a company who was investing. I think they were real estate, and I think they were claiming they have X dollars and all this. So companies were doing due diligence, but because I think it was like 5 to 8 years ago. So back then, I mean, like,
yeah, there's nothing,
Markham,
no real infrastructure.
Well, it's also like Toronto's gonna understand how to do due diligence. Like companies know. Sometimes in that, it's the companies who aren't coached to say, well, money, great. If I don't involve my lawyers, maybe I'll save this fee. Maybe I'll save this fee. They try to shortcut it, and then that's what happens, right? You don't do your due diligence. You don't really learn what's out there, and then you get scammed. So it's not the greatest thing to hear, and we're still seeing some of that. I think we've heard some horror stories in the area, and that's where we have to do our due diligence. And I think that's why sometimes, for me, if I meet companies who are a perfect fit for our space, I'm like, let's keep in touch. Because there's things that we can support with that you don't have to be physically tied to us, where we want to support. Because at the end of the day, our goal is just to help people. I think that's the biggest thing after all.
Definitely.
But it's one of those where I think people just need to be cautious where they're getting their dollars from.
Yeah, Scott Galloway from Elsco Inc. Made this analysis, right, where he's like, there's more companies starting up now than ever, but the actual cost of starting a company is the highest. Right, so it's actually the cost of initiation, cost of the risk factors involved, right, the capital required, the resources required, all that is actually higher than it's ever been. But the need for new companies to develop is also the highest. So it's lose kind of scenario where it's like, yeah, we need these companies to develop and solve these kind of problem sets, lay down the foundation of what the future of work looks like, but the resourcing required is so immense, right? So I guess it's really comes down to more institutions like YSpace and the hub here, UTSE, right? Providing these kind of environments to not just learn, but as a stepping stone. But I think the next stage is how to network them all together. Right, and if it's not the government is gonna, the public that's gonna do that, then it has to be some kind of entity that does that, or a collection, a community, a collective that comes together to do that, right?
Yeah, it's gonna be because there's just too much fluctuation in government. Like you were changing every 4 years, every couple of years, and then who knows what's gonna happen. But I think with what you're saying as well, it's part of the other thing. It's the cost is because of everything else you have to go around it. So for students, even though I say students shouldn't start a company, they should explore, right? It's the best time. You're getting them all the support you can in the world. You're getting so much resources. And I think it's about educating people on that front of things. And then just being scrappy with it. Like there's some entrepreneurs who start and they're just super scrappy and they know exactly how to get the most out of the littlest things. And I wish those people would share their stories. Right? They don't because they're like, well, I don't know if I want to share it publicly and stuff, but I think they need to, because I think some of the ways that we've heard about how companies were able to start out, the scrappiness and the resourcefulness, we're like, that's so useful. We need to tell everyone that because everyone can use it. But that's the other thing as well.
The biggest thing is I think is like the public libraries are becoming incubators. Right? Like there's so much creative spaces, so much lessons, so much not just space, but also resources coming in.
Yep.
And I think that's brilliant, right? Using these facilities now where people don't really need to like rent books as much, but those spaces are still important for the service in the community. And now helping them in this kind of aspect, right, how to start businesses or organizations or solve problems and how to monetize on the solutions you make is such an essential tool set.
I think libraries are going to change a lot more.
Yeah.
We've seen like the 3D printers and all the makerspace stuff come in. We see them rent out video games and stuff like that. But I think to your point, they're building these business centers, but it's like all these librarians who were so used to a certain way of being a librarian, that's going to have to shift. That's going to have to change with everything else that's going on. And it's like, can we just get them to better support the community? And then I think, to your point as well, that's going to create some duplication in the ecosystem. I love to see how they can just work together.
Yeah.
I think every time we see something pop up that's threatening, people go, okay, we have to destroy it. It's like, no, let's just sit down. Let's figure out how we work together. Like, stop going with this. How do we destroy them? How are we better than them? Let's just work together, because I think there's more startups than anyone can imagine, right? Like, to your point, it's this whole new sexy thing where there's always going to be new startups popping up all the damn time. There's always more than enough for any one of us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up with this last conversation. How do you see everything kind of coming together? How do you see all these different institutions and incubators and the library? How do you see them working together at all, and how does that look like to you?
I'll be honest, I don't know how they're going to come together. I mean, I think it's a dream to see them all to work together. I think from an institutional standpoint, I think everyone has a very good role to play, because I think institutions come in, they become an anchor for the community.
Yeah.
So UTSC being the anchor for Markham, for Scarborough, right? And then York is going to be an anchor for Markham, and all the way out west as well. So that's going to be, I think it's going to be more than just about an institution coming in and building innovation, but it's like, how do you build innovation in your own community? Because every community has a different spin. Like, I'd be curious to talk to someone at the hub and be like, okay, look, what are you hearing from your community? Because we heard in Markham was food, right? But I don't know what's going on here. But Markham is also known as semiconductor industry. So it's like, we didn't really hear that. So there's probably enough going on there that we don't need to support it. So I think it's going to be looking at the libraries and looking at the different folks and say, okay, how do you tackle your local issues and how do you address that? And then when you're working together, I think there's the willingness to have conversation. I think most people are like, well, is it really worth my time? Is it this? You just never know. I think it's about building relationships and building the ecosystem together. I think libraries have had their roles for years. I think they're going through a transition. They're trying to figure it out. As an institution, as incubators, I think we do have a role to play in that, to figure it out, because what we always think about is, what's our pipeline look like, right? Like, if we graduate companies, where are we getting our companies from? The library, the small business center. So if we work with them closer, we have a healthier pipeline. So I think that's my message to the incubators, to why they need to work downstream, because you can't really say, well, the other thing is also, sure, some incubators will be like, yeah, I'm constantly getting companies. How good are they? Right? Like, we're getting companies too, but how good are they?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and it's, people glorify certain incubators' rejection numbers. That's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to say I only accept X%. It should be, there's this many great, we just don't have space, right? Because when you're rejecting that many, it's like, okay, are they just really bad, or what's going on? And how do we stop some of that? How do we kind of uplift the entire ecosystem and say, maybe let's create less really bad companies that we just won't take on, but create more really good ones that we can support, the rest of the community can support. And sometimes it just starts at the local level with the libraries and the small business centers.
I think it comes down to the fact that we can't really track companies' progress from the ground up, right? How it does is this incubator, where do they go? Like, there's no real tracking metrics for how they progress.
You're right, and that's the story of it, right? Like, when we track someone who's going through all these things, that's a story that we should be telling people. How a company is able to use these different resources, scale up and grow, how these companies are using our resources to help them really leverage it, and what does that mean for the community. I don't think we're doing a good job of tracking it, to your point, but that's where the lack of stories coming from.
Well, that's what we hope to do with the podcast. Talk to, have long-form discussions with industry players, with startups, with investors, professionals who support the startup community, to founders to build them, and kind of integrate everyone together to have this wholesome conversation. So, man, thanks for coming on and being so candid about your thoughts. And this has been great, man. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. I'm happy
David,
to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Perfect. Wrap, guys. Perfect.